Let me give you some advice for efficiency. Live with it.
That's science right there.
I think I had to undo it before I entered the call.
Okay, well there we go. Hey, so anyway, Tony, Mark, Tony.
Tony?
Yes, Mark. Can you hear me okay, by the way? I'm not, don't have a headset or anything like that. You coming through?
Yeah, you're right.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
And actually, on this podcast, it's best not to be clear sometimes.
Understood, yes. What did you say? I'm not sure. But that's good.
I'm assuming you've listened to none of these? Even though
I have. In fact, I told my son about the fact that we were going to use this podcast this afternoon, and he said, give me some information about it. And he checked it out, and he thought it was pretty cool. He liked the write-ups. He thought the guests were interesting, and I didn't listen to him, so that's probably maybe that's why he had an opinion.
This won't come across well, but I'll ask anyway. Are you sure he's not like in a permanent coma?
No, he's not. He was on the couch at the time, so maybe he was somewhat comatose, but not.
Okay, there we go.
So this is what, David? Episode what? 73?
Well, I have no. We're I do have episode 71 ready to go. I just haven't written anything for it. So this will be officially 72, assuming we get it published in the next 3 months.
Right.
But yeah, this is slated as episode 72, and so Tony was specifically not going to prepare for this, so he knows very little about it other than having heard a few, and he was getting ready to do a page full of notes, as I recall, and I discouraged him.
I've heard all 72, and I still don't know what it's about.
Yeah, I was disqualified if I did any preparation. So
exactly.
Preparation
H.
I think I was telling. That's bad.
Thank you.
I was the now late, and I don't know if I can say great. It wasn't Stephen King. It would be Larry King, right?
Yeah, Larry King.
Larry King had something in common with us, which is that apparently he did no preparation for his shows, on the theory that he would know more than his listeners would know. So if that was a good footsteps to follow in, that's exactly what we're doing.
And I think our successes, Larry's and ours, parallel one another. I mean, let's face it. We're just almost interchangeable careers. So just.
Well, Larry was always jealous. He was always jealous of this podcast.
Yes. now more than ever.
Yes, direct.
Yes. So I told Mark very little about your background, Tony. I think I said that you worked at, apart from being a partner of mine now at this law firm, Davis Mullen, you were previously with a big 16, big 8, big 4, big 2 accounting firm. So what is it, big 4?
Big 4 now, yes.
So when did you start? Was it, how long were you with those? So our listener, maybe they're in the negatives now, so I don't know how you'd say that. Maybe you say it backwards, or maybe you say it in Pig Latin. So what would it be? Isnerle? That's the negative version of listener. So our Isnerle may know nothing about not big law firms, but big accounting firms.
Right.
How long
Let me jump in here. So you're a CPA, huh?
No, I'm an attorney. I feel like I'm a CPA, having spent so much time working with CPAs, but no, I'm an attorney specialized in taxation. And by the way, my name backwards, for the benefit of our negative listener, is Enot Avlasad.
Okay. Now, did you just have you been practicing your Pig Latin, or did you just make that up in real time?
No, I think even the kids and I did that years ago, and it stuck with me.
Because if you made it up in real time, you'd be way too bright to be on this podcast.
And I would scare myself. I had no doubt if I did that.
So you're a tax lawyer, eh?
Yes, I'm a tax lawyer. Yeah.
Just
Mark's saying it.
Oddly, on this particular podcast, I'm like the voice of reason,
Okay.
which is the exact opposite of what I usually am in life.
So yes, but that's why I remain calm, though. All right, I'm going to remain calm. So
Well, how does it?
I've known a few tax lawyers.
Hey, we can ask him something. This is not a political podcast, but we can ask him what's going on with Trump and those audits.
Well, there are a number of audits, and what I know just by following in the press, and some of the third-party publications that we get at the firm.
Cheers, Metamucil.
Very nice, very nice.
Breakfast of Champions.
Keep going.
Okay. I think so. There's a couple of audits going on in New York State that are probably his biggest concern. One by the Attorney General and one by the Southern District of New York. Yeah, Southern District of New York prosecutor for the Southern District of New York, rather.
They always say the states are worse than the feds.
Yeah, no doubt.
Tony doesn't want to respond to that one, Mark. Keep going.
No, it was actually a good question. It was a valid question.
Keep going. So
I think the states can be worse than the feds, oftentimes, and there are a number of reasons for that. But we can deal with that later. That's
a very kind way to dismiss Mark.
I've been dismissed on my own goddamn podcast. I love it.
No.
Tony, there's a nice man from the DOR waiting outside your door right now.
So anyway, I can't spill the details on the odds other than one's criminal, one's civil, and it all has to do with financial misdeeds of one form or another.
Is it interesting? Is it interesting from a tax lawyer's perspective, or is this sort of routine? Like Mark's under, I think, audit numerous times now, right, Mark?
Check, please.
Check. I'm sorry, he can't hear you.
Back connection. I can't hear you.
Back connection. Yeah, exactly. I don't think those audits are particularly technically interesting because you're trying to prove fraud, you're trying to prove a misdeed. There really isn't a lot of debate, I don't think, going on the technical merits per se, unlike, for example, the case that was decided years ago now on states taxing internet companies under sale in the states, the Wayfair decision. That was a big deal. There were a lot of merits to kick around there and decide. And by the way, that's not what I specialize in per se, but that would have been an interesting case.
Well, it's the fact that Trump was under audit. So all we know is do we even know he's being audited by the IRS?
Well, he says he is.
He says he is. Yeah, I don't know that. I mean, IRS wouldn't disclose that even if he was. But he says he is. Exactly. Mark's right. What we do know is that what's being done at by the state prosecutors and attorney generals. I mean, they have to disclose when they charge someone.
Well, wait a minute, but that's not an audit. That's a criminal or civil proceeding. I guess that's
correct. Right. Fair point. Yeah. So it wouldn't be fair to call them audits. It'd be call them investigations or criminal or civil proceedings, something of that nature, right?
Well, let me ask you this: has the New York Attorneys General or New York Attorney General has he / I guess it's a she now, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Has she seen the IRS audit that Trump is not showing to anybody else?
She could have requested to see that. I don't know what her rights. I don't know what the parameters of her rights are, frankly. I never practiced civil and the civil side of tax issues or the criminal side. Okay? So I don't really know if there are any constraints on what she can or can't subpoena. I'm sure she would have tried to collect all relevant records from the IRS. After all, she actually would have to get it from them unless he disclosed them to the Attorney General.
Well, this is a burning question that applies to all lawyers. Mark, follow me here. This is going to be a tough one. So reserve your laughter. So you're a member of the tax bar, right?
Mm-hmm.
So don't you all belly up to the bar and share all the details of your various investigations? Isn't that just common when you're a member of the bar? You know, your brothers and sisters and all those things.
Yeah, you do. There are subgroups of the bar, and it's subgroups within tax and so on, and within each of the kind of informal committees, they share information about what they're working on, or they particularly share information on issues that they're trying to solve and they're having trouble solving.
So wait a
What
minute,
do you
it was
think?
supposed to be a fully sarcastic question that was supposed to draw a snicker or a reprimand from Mark, and you took it seriously. This is bad.
It's bad.
Okay, so
well, you were asking sort of I'm not a lawyer. I don't play one on TV.
You do have a very nice blurry background though. That's giving you that funny halo effect. That's kind of clear.
That's good. That's because my lawyers have advised me from an IP standpoint that with all the logos behind me, I might be infringing because of the wide nature of this broadcast.
Oh, I thought it was because you had a tax audit being done and that you didn't want us to see the IRS guys and the FBI agents running around behind you.
No. It was
clever though. Clever.
Yeah. It was really just because my IP lawyer is a pain in the ass and made me put pieces of tape over everything.
You haven't paid him yet.
But Mark, I think you could play a lawyer on a series. I really think you could.
So go ahead, Mark.
That's reassuring. What? Where are we?
we?
I don't know. What are we talking about?
Yes.
How is the tax lawyer?
Well, actually,
somebody talks about at the BBO or the Bar Association or any of those other places. I want to know, because this is a show about failure, what can you contribute to the bar, the failure bar, if you will?
Hey, before you get there, I do want to make it clear for the record, given there are two lawyers on this call, that no, lawyers do not belly up to the bar and share information about their clients' cases.
I've seen lawyers at bars.
Yes, they may belly up to the bar, but they don't share information about the cases. But keep going. Go ahead. Ask your question or answer his question if you heard it.
The failure of the bar. Yeah.
So
the failure bar.
This is the failure bar of overseers, board of bar, the failure BBO, and we're in the back room. We're smoking our cigars, even though I detest cigars. And what sort of what failures would you want to expose to this audience?
We normally get 45 minutes into this meaningless podcast.
I forgot to do it now.
Ask that question
because it's two lawyers, and you generally don't let me get any words in when it's lawyers. Unless I'm being deposed, in which case I talk very slowly.
I told him he couldn't prepare for the podcast, though. By the way.
Yeah, and Dave, I don't have a ready answer to that.
Good. So let's go back to my questions.
Yeah.
Overruled.
Overruled. Hey, so go back and tell us what it's like to be at a. So you were a lawyer.
Yes.
You are a lawyer, but you were previously a lawyer at a Big Four accounting firm. What was that like?
Right. Good question. So, and I think he started with that question in terms of when did I start working there? I started in 1987.
Mark was in middle school then, I think.
Yeah.
I must have been.
Trying to decide what he's having for lunch that day. What do you want for lunch? I don't know.
It was like a chocolate milk thing in a little container. And I was probably elementary school.
He was trying to figure out how to open it.
Yeah, so I started in 87 and, with a little amount of trepidation because back then, it's the Big Four now. Back then it was the Big Eight. They had a reputation for being a sweatshop. No personal life. And so while everyone I met was nice, it's like, gee, what's going to happen when I get inside? Am I going to forfeit, any personal life and not see my family or anything like that? But in actuality, it wasn't that at all. I mean,
were you fresh out of law school?
No, I wasn't fresh out of law school, but I did have a short stint at a small boutique firm before I went to I had a stint at a smaller organization rather before I went to the Big Four. But fundamentally, yeah, I would have been, I would have been in my 20s. So.
Oh, okay. So what was it like?
So actually, it was. At first, it's a little awkward being an attorney, at least back then. Like being an attorney, for the most part, surrounded by accountants, because they're trained differently. They think differently.
Oh, really?
They have different skills. Well, if you think about what the function of an auditor is, their job is fundamentally to test and to challenge. So your financial statements that you put together and you're asking me to audit, a bunch of information on it. And my job is to test it, challenge it, because at the end of the day, if I'm going to have to sign an audit on those financial statements, right? So they're very skeptical people. No, they don't accept anything you say at face value, because after training.
Let me ask you a fundamental question. If you were a tax attorney or an auditor, and you saw Mark's background change like that, would you challenge that?
Good question. Yes, I think I would. I think that would be. They have assets and liabilities. I would put that in the liability.
Okay.
The balance.
But so using that stupid point as an example, we're going to challenge you.
Yes.
Which is, how would a tax attorney or an attorney in general ask Mark about his ever-changing screen background and contrast?
We can do so much better than that question. You accuse me of panelizing.
Oh, that's true.
Oh my gosh!
That's a rubbish question.
Good point. I agree with that.
We can do so much better. So Tony, you work with David normally?
David and I
tries not to.
Actually, so we work for the same firm.
Okay.
Our skills and practice areas don't overlap for the most part. But
doing tax law and he's doing IP law makes I can't see how they blend at all.
I mean, not to make this political at all, but we would be perfectly qualified to represent a certain ex-president in the impeachment proceedings, though.
No, he needs criminal defense.
Yeah. Well, true.
Anyway,
okay, keep going. We disrupted Mark's question.
So it's less of a question; it's more of a discussion. So, for some odd reason, you felt compelled to join this podcast. That was despite all proper warnings, all the notices.
He's working back, by the way, Tony. He's working back to the same damn question. So be forewarned. By the time Mark's done with this 3-minute long question, he's going to ask you about failure.
Got it. Yes.
Keep going, Mark.
So what have you? Now I have to come up with a new question. So when shit goes sideways in your sort of world, what's that look like?
So actually,
Dave.
So Dave. Well, I don't know. So in my world, it's unpleasant, right? Because you've kind of set the
like Metamucil unpleasant.
Kind of, yeah. Heartburn unpleasant, and maybe anxiety provoking, because you set the stage with someone in terms of what in terms of what their expectations are and the outcome of the issue they've asked you to address.
Right.
And if that turns out to be partially correct, or
get more concrete. This is like the vague answer I hear from certain high school students I happen to know.
Well, yeah. So wait, do you do people or do you do corporations or both?
Primarily corporations.
Okay. So when they're meeting with you, they're already thinking, oh God, we're in trouble.
No, not really. Actually, when they're meeting with you, typically the meeting with you could need your help.
Okay.
I can't figure it out. What do I do? What's the best way to handle the situation?
Is it preemptive or is it always as reactive when they're meeting with you?
It's both. It's both. Sometimes it's, hey, we're thinking about of making a change to our programs or policies or arrangements.
Okay.
Before we make we have something in mind. Before we do it, we want to bring you in and talk about it. or
So-
it's after the fact. Oh, we did something.
We
What do
got
we
to
do now?
notice.
Mark, in your genius line of questioning here, can you ask him what he does?
He says he's a tax lawyer. What else do I need to know?
What is that? I mean, nobody.
How hard
has-
can that be?
our Isner lay, I guess since there's a lot of negative listeners, they are our Isner lays have no idea what a tax lawyer does.
What does a tax lawyer do?
Depends on what area of tax law the person works in.
So well, we're talking to you.
Yeah, so me, just what I do. So I, over time, had to specialize because tax law is very complicated and broad subject. And you find yourself actually feeling dangerous talking about certain areas of tax law because it's so complicated and you might not have dealt with it recently. So you really need to specialize, and I end up specializing in issues that involve compensation, so arrangements for rewarding employees, your employees or executives, and benefits, health benefits, retirement benefits, and the like, fringe benefits,
Okay.
deferred compensation benefits. So I work in that area of the law, the tax law, which I know sounds like it's pretty narrow, but you put it under a microscope and you find that it's really very broad and complicated.
So there might be a number of tax lawyers that go work with a given client from your firm.
Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Because it depends on what the issues are. So in my case, what I do is, I don't litigate, but what I end up doing on a regular basis is find issues and questions around if the decisions or actions I want to take regarding any form of compensation or benefit or what have you is compliant or not. Or if a decision they want to make or something they're thinking about doing, does it produce the best tax outcome? Maybe there's a better way to design the system that they're trying to build or comp structures trying to build to get a better outcome. And usually that's the case. Sometimes it's, hey, we want to do something and we think it's unclear what the rules are. We need to write an opinion or something that can give us some comfort that what we're doing is right, even though it might not be crystal clear. That there's
Can you
a
make
basis.
this more concrete? So just get.
Well, I have a good use case to kind of test this with.
There we go. Oh, don't panelize. No panelize.
No, I'm not going to panelize.
Good.
I'm not going to name the company I'm talking about, although they're in the news a lot. I'm in the technology space. So a lot of technology companies favor lower base pay, lower cash compensation versus giving you a stock option with 3 or 4 year vesting. What's better from the company standpoint and what's better from the employee standpoint?
Are you trying to get free tax advice?
No, I'm perfectly happy with my situation. But so
Yeah.
I'll even give you. I mean, so one of the larger companies is known for they have sort of a ceiling on the amount of money that they would pay people, and then they give you a ton of stock, and you're expected to. So it's like a declining salary amount over 3 years, and then the value of the stock is to rise. And as the curve goes down on the cash side, you're expected to meet that delta by selling off a number of your shares. And the way I've heard it explained to me is that that's better for the company, but is it better for the employee, or is it the same?
Yeah. So actually, that decision, that compensation strategy is less a tax-driven strategy.
Okay.
Usually, and more of either a combination of philosophical decision on how to best reward and incentivize people, as well as maybe a cash management perspective. So the company that decides to pay maybe cash compensation that's below what the market might tell you is median or average compensation for a particular job. I think below that will save you cash, by replacing that with equity and stock, essentially is cashless way of compensating somebody. There's a financial expense to that, obviously,
Right.
but it's cashless. And the point of view might be that's okay. One, because it saves us cash, but secondarily, everybody's got more skin in the game that way.
Well, wait a
So
minute.
okay.
Let me try to bring this down to earth, and if I can. I mean, it is a somewhat interesting question, Mark.
Surprisingly.
No, it's a good question.
So is giving away stock a free? So take the startup. Let's ignore the bigger company that Mark seems to be alluding to. When a startup gives away stock, can we consider that free to the startup, which is, hey, you just pulled it out of the air. How could it hurt anybody? Give us more.
Yeah, so it's not free. It's not a cash cost to the company to give stock to their workers. They didn't have to dip into their into their funding to pay the person to give them the stock, to buy the stock to give it to them. So it's not a cash cost, but it's a financial statement cost. So those shares that you gave someone or options you gave someone, the startup, will have to be recorded on the financial statements of that company as an expense. And the amount of the expense depends on a bunch of valuation decisions and analysis, but it's not free in that there's a financial cost to it. So, for example, that startup, when it actually becomes successful, and it starts to look for investors, ultimately go public, all that stock you issued shows up for the investing public and the broader public, for that matter, if you go public, to see. And if you, for example, were particularly outlandish in the amount of grants you made, that might adversely affect you ultimately, because you're going to have an outsized compensation expense to do all that stuff, all those stock grants. Not common, but...
So wait a minute, but Mark, are you following this so far, or no, other than changing your background?
It just does it at random. No, I am. I mean, it's, you know, I have friends working for the company that, company A, I'll call them just for the purpose of argument, that have been touting this sort of approach, because in year one, you're doing very well, but in year three, you're doing less well for all the obvious reasons, because the curve works the other way. And you're now having to sell off stock to maintain your, you know, your expenses. So I wasn't sure if that was good or bad, or if it was good from the employee standpoint or not. I mean, you're then getting like a short-term capital gains, which I don't know if that's equivalent to the amount of payroll tax that you'd be paying. Mm-hmm. So really, it's like, how do you evaluate an offer like that? Because in the technology space, you have offers that are 100% cash, 100% stock, and then this is sort of the hybrid with this, you know, changing formula.
Is this common? By the way, how common is this? Do you have any sense, Tony?
Yeah, no, I think that's sort of an outlier in terms of a practice where you hire someone at a particular level of pay, and you reduce that level of pay over time and replace that with maybe a larger grant of share, stock, or options, or what have you. You know, ultimately, whether it's a success or not, at least from the employee's perspective, depends entirely on what happens to the value of the shares. I mean, company shares are increasing, you know, substantially or dramatically over time, and you'd be much better off than you would have been had you simply paid you what the market says to pay you.
So is this whole scheme does it give you insight into the employee incentive, which is, we want you to think of the long term, as long as the long term isn't too long term. We want you to think of the midterm when you think about you and all of your co-employees. As you think about doing things for the company, think about things that will keep our stock rising over a 3-year period. Otherwise, you're going to be sunk as your pay goes down. Is that what they're thinking? Is that why it's 3 years, or is there something else going on?
Yeah, it definitely designed to be motivational and incentivizing. I mean, you're driven to try to drive up that stock price as much as you can in terms of, and take the action you can that are within your control to do to bring up, to rise it, make the stock price rise. You know, there's some evidence that works. You know, it depends on other factors, obviously, but
is the timetable too short? 3 years?
Usually, what 3 years? 3 years is considered to be long enough for most industries in terms of how long it takes to vest. 4 to 3 years typically is the average vesting time frame for those grants of shares to people. In some industries, it's longer because they need more time to, like, for example, pharmaceutical industries may have a longer vesting schedule because, it takes a long time to figure out if a drug is going to work. And they don't necessarily want to reward people richly for a bunch of drugs that were in the pipeline and were bust. So they may have longer vesting schedules, but for the most part, most companies will have a vesting schedule of 3 to 4 years, and that's typically long enough. Because if you make it too long, the employee might lose interest, right?
Well, so I guess so Mark, was this all a vesting thing, which is that they didn't grant stock initially? They granted options, or how did that work out?
No, it was again, this company, I have several friends working for this company. They, there's a max, there's like a ceiling that all employees cannot go above. So everybody makes no more than X. And the way they handle the leveling or the banding, if you will, is how many stock options you get. So the guy sweeping the warehouse floor can't, he gets handled differently than the CEO might get handled. But the incentives are, I think Tony's right. Everybody jointly tries to drive the value up, and then you try and calculate what is that portion in years 2 and beyond that I must liberate, after taxes or less taxes to maintain my, my household expenses.
Is this a burning question you've had for a while now, or?
It's not a burning question, but it's a common discussion item amongst my kind of fellow travelers in the high tech world, because you see different schemes or schema, which is, I think, the plural of schemes. You do see different
that.
Compensation.
I think schemes is the plural of scheme.
I think schema.
Schema is like
schema. I don't know.
I don't know.
I think I've been reading too many software guides.
Well, where's the failure grammarian? We are call that person in.
We are all
episode 2. He jumped out the window. Trust me.
So, Mark, another genius burning question.
Well, I thought that was quite a good question.
Yeah, it is a good question.
Let me say this, Mark, about it.
Hey, so is this company that you're referring to that should remain unnamed, are they a private company or a public company?
They're a very large public company that just had the changing of a CEO announced yesterday.
Oh, interesting. Okay, I didn't realize that was their model. Oh, so for a company like that, actually, that.
But I didn't name them, even by inference.
Well, no, by the time this podcast plays, could be any number of CEOs. Yeah.
Right.
Correct. Right, exactly. So since you're talking about,
might be a whole. By the time we get this out, there might be a whole change of administration. So at the rate we're going.
Actually, just to be really clear, the way I got this whole, and this is true, this whole recitation was Google served it up to me because I'd been looking at this company and comparing compensation structures for, my own, job searches, because, the cash comp is lower than a lot of other ones.
I think he's trying to get free tax advice.
No. All right, so let me shift gears.
He's full of burning questions.
Wow, it really is.
Can I tell you? It's better than the shit you've been slinging, Dave.
I liked
I know you like this.
I liked my, how would a tax attorney ask this question? How would an accountant ask this question?
So this is a variation on one of my favorite themes. So what's the most egregious thing that you've been called in to solve? What's the worst? Like they called you in and it's like, oh, Tony, you won't believe what read this, and they hand you a bundle of notices, or what's the worst thing? And then what do they do to get around that? Or how did you fix it?
He just looks like a confused man right now, Mark.
No.
Yeah. So, there are a number of, so in terms of how do you fix it, problems I've been brought into, probably one of the stickiest had to deal with a compensation program for a CEO that the board wanted to give the CEO, but they really didn't want to disclose it.
Oh, you're kidding.
So how do you do that?
They didn't want to disclose to the CEO how much they were paying him?
No, they didn't want to disclose outside of the organization. So, for example, we're a public
Was it a
company.
public company? Was it a public company?
No, it was not a public company. But it'd be the equivalent of, we want to provide the CEO with this package of compensation. We don't want to put it on the proxy. Do that. It would be similar. It's a similar.
I'm sorry, I missed that word. They don't want to put it where?
On
In
a
the proxy. They don't want to put it in the proxy. So it'd be similar to that. It wasn't that, but it'd be similar to that. And you know, there are very detailed rules, as you can probably imagine, for all organizations that need to file either with the IRS or with the SEC that define what the rules are regarding disclosure. This is an organization rather, that was really determined not to disclose it. And the CEO was adamant he didn't want it to be disclosed, because it might have been embarrassing. How do we do it?
Was it embarrassing because it's too much, or just because too little?
Yeah, it would have been embarrassing because it would have triggered a lot of questions.
Okay.
A lot of questions he didn't want to answer.
I need to point out that as a favorite phrase of Mark's, that's the phrase "embarrassment of riches," and you've always wondered that applies to. This is an exact.
This would have been an embarrassment of riches. Yeah.
Yeah, that's very unusual.
Yeah. So it was a tricky. So wait a minute. Is this that the $60,000 with the word? When you say the word and the buck drops from the ceiling, I win $1,000.
That's the podcast.
No, this audience won't know the Groucho Marx reference.
Okay. Got it.
But I want you to know that I know the Groucho Marx reference that you
at least someone does. So it was tricky because the board was totally comfortable with the package they put together for this person. They weren't embarrassed by it, but they didn't want to disclose it because others might not agree. A lot of explaining to do.
Embarrassment of riches. Yeah, we got
right. You might want to hide the ball, and how do we solve it? How do we figure this out? And you know, our job is to look at the rules, not say, okay, you know, let's hide the wall for you, but rather do the rule. Are there any rules out there you can rely on that will allow you to do that?
Wait a minute. I think I have the answer. I think you pay some of the money to his daughter and son-in-law.
Wow. No, that wouldn't have worked. But good try. Very good try.
I was modeling it after a recent situation that we have seen in the press.
Correct.
So that would not work here.
It would not work here. No. And fundamentally, I guess the problem was I was in a very awkward position because I couldn't get there. Couldn't really get there. Not close enough for them. And so
they
didn't
like your advice. They didn't like your advice.
No, because the advice wasn't sure. You don't have to disclose or tell anyone this is what you're doing. That was really sticky, and that's a tough place to be in because you're being brought in to look at something. You know, they're you know, optimistic that you're going to find an answer to the problem. You get deep into the issue and start sharing with them where you are, and they start getting upset. Obviously, right?
But you're not a doctor sharing a cancer diagnosis, so it's not like you're walking back in, you know, holding the file, going, "You're not going to like this."
Right.
You know.
Wait a minute. Does this count as a humble brag? Is that story a humble brag?
No.
That's sort of like he's proving he's the last ethical lawyer out there.
No, I just think nobody likes
no.
to deliver bad news.
Nobody likes to deliver bad news. I mean, it was ugly. It was ugly. It was not a win. It was not a win for me.
No.
Yeah. So the answer was they have to disclose it, and tough beans, suck it up.
So what they end up doing?
Honestly, they may have shopped around and found someone who said they thought it was okay.
Javanka's lawyer may have an answer.
Yeah.
You know, what are we going to do now that the Trumps are out?
Good question. We can relax for a little while, which may be nice.
Yeah, but the new guy, you can't even make up stupid jokes about the new guy.
Why did you pivot to that?
Yeah, really.
Well, because the story reminded me of Javanka.
Yeah, I didn't see it as that. I knew you were drawing that parallel. I thought that was an interesting an interesting story. Like, what do you do when you have to disclose something you don't want to disclose? And the real answer is find another lawyer.
Yeah, right. Yeah, apparently.
Well, Dave,
yeah,
that would be
yeah.
like for you. What do you do? Because David has been my lawyer in the past around IP issues.
He didn't
What
pay
do
me,
you
by
do?
the way. Did not pay.
I paid
Really?
you in sunshine and
Oh,
flowers,
Puppy dogs and rainbows.
puppy dogs and rainbows. Who pays anybody?
Look at
That's
ran.
actually the
He
question.
Ran. He ran.
Who
Oh,
pays?
he's back. Keep
Okay.
going.
So, I mean, David, it's the same for you. So, an inventor comes to you and says, "I've got this great idea, new widget," and you're like,
He's panelizing Tony.
"No, I'm not." But it's the same thing. It's the same question. What do you do when you have to deliver the bad news?
Well, I
bedside
think what
manner's gotta
Tony
be
did
about the
is,
same.
I think what Tony's answer is correct. Sometimes you just can't deliver the bad. I mean, the bad news is you have to deliver the correct news, and
Right.
you just. But I do think, and Tony must do the same thing. Usually, the answer is, and Mark, I don't think it's quite that the scenario you raised probably wouldn't be where this would come up, but more often it comes up in very often. At least on the patent prosecution side, the obtaining side, the question comes up when somebody's asking, can I get away with not disclosing this to the authorities?
Right. Well, because I look at you, you guys are both, instead, you're not general practitioners, you're specialists, just like you're an orthopedic surgeon and, you're
Look at
being
those
asked.
hands. They're the hands of an orthopedic surgeon.
Yeah,
right
but
in front of us.
you're being asked, will I ever walk again? And you can either say, yeah, you'll be skipping down the street, which is BS, or you can say you're not going to like it, but you're going to be bedridden forever. And then they go get another opinion who tells them something else, and the outcome is who knows. I mean, you're both as specialists having to deal with that.
So hold on.
So
Tony,
the question is, let me get to the question. So the point I wanted to draw, not panelizing.
That's not a question yet.
No. It was a preamble. It was a panelized preamble.
It's like 2 hours.
How do you deliver the bad news overall, guys?
Well, I was trying to tell you what you do. And I was trying to get Tony to answer this. I think what I find when the bad news, he's going to sneeze on us here. Bless you. I think what you try to do is get them to do something which the word would not be compromise, but maybe the answer is, let's find a way to get this information across in the way most palatable. So, for example, to draw one of my favorite personages into this, what do you do when the case you want to make is the election was a fraud? And in point of fact, you end up with, and your lawyers are telling you if it's a free speech issue, what you do is while you're making the free speech case, you happen to work in that the election was a fraud. So you kind of compromise.
When does the hair dye dripping down the forehead come in?
That guy got fired a while ago and they didn't pay his bill. But I am being somewhat serious. Tony, don't you do the same thing, which is you got to work with what you're given and then move it forward to a plausible position.
right, and or you take it as far as you take it as far as you can based on the rules. And you try to interpret them in a way that's advantageous to the client, but there is a limit, right? I mean,
Yeah, there's a limit.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, and you may have to withdraw, or you may have to just say, I can't do this one. As this famous personage found this past weekend, we lost 5 lawyers.
Right, exactly.
Well, yeah. Well, I think it's that they didn't. Their client didn't. I think it was their client was recalcitrant and he didn't want to pay.
So actually, isn't that the answer to your question, Mark? Oh, I don't think. Let's assume.
No,
that,
my question was the delivery of bad news.
well, the delivery of bad news, I guess. So the answer is you do your best to deliver it, and then you work from there. You could just say, I'm going to deliver this news or no news at all, and you get fired. Or you try to find if there's a happy medium, for example, making the First Amendment case and working in that there was election fraud. And that way your client can raise more money through donations.
Well, so in my world,
Tony's
which is,
thinking about that one.
No.
It's all a scheme, Tony, to get donations, isn't it? Isn't that the whole point of this thing?
Of his thing, yeah, because
That's all he's doing.
he has unfettered access to the whatever $250 million worth of
correct. Isn't that the whole game here? You have a story and you stick with it.
Tony doesn't want to do
money.
doesn't want to do political commentary. I have a feeling.
Look at him. He looks like he ought to be a political commentator.
Hey, well, look, what I was going to say is that the hard part is how do you deliver? How do you tell someone something they don't want to hear?
Right.
Is bad news, and still manage to have a functioning relationship with them, because they're obviously going to be angry. They're going to be angry at what you're going to tell them.
They're going to be angry bear, an angry bear.
Angry
That's right.
bears, exactly. And, you know, when someone's angry, they're not listening to the rationale as to why you're saying what you're saying, why you know, the advice you're giving them is correct. They're not really absorbing all the rationale, the intricacies of the issues, which oftentimes are complicated. How do you manage to do that without them saying, okay, fine, thank you, goodbye, I want to see you again?
Right.
You know, that's the hard part. That's a really hard.
You, I think, have beat Mark on the run-up to a non-question.
Well, what I was going to say, yeah, he didn't beat me, is in my world, which is, you know, working from a technology consulting standpoint, before we would get in bed with a client, we would.
Your world is a mess of guitars.
It is, but you wanted the real background.
Yeah.
It's better than the balloons. I got rid of the 99 balloons.
Yeah, I agree. I like
Doesn't beat the Metamucil, though.
Won't help. But in my world, we try and determine whether we can actually fulfill the engagement up front before we actually go forward with it. So we're going to know what answer they're seeking before we say yes to the engagement. And I'm talking about, you know, when I was in the telco side or some of the other sides. And if we don't think we can help the guy, or they can't pay, or, you know, we've done a requirements gathering exercise, and the outcome of that is we can't help you or you won't pay for it, we just bail preemptively. I don't know if you guys have that.
It's different because you guys are typically in your multiple businesses, and they do seem to change every week or two.
I try and keep one step ahead of a few things.
The IRS. Oh.
No, they know where I am.
In your multiple
They found me already. Don't worry.
In your multiple businesses, you are pitching on something which is bringing in millions of dollars. So part of the cost of doing business is doing these investigations, and then you see if you can produce. But Tony and I are usually working on a piecemeal basis. Piecemeal? A per piece basis. So think of us as like wringing out one piece of laundry after another, or ironing one piece of laundry after another. So it becomes more complicated because we're well into it, and we're usually trying to get remunerated for it while we're coming up with the bad news. So we're in a decidedly different role.
So you're like you're like flying the plane, and you're trying to collect the fare as it's crashing. Folks, Mr. Captain speaking. I've got good news and bad news. Good news is the fares are on sale.
I think you need to consult Marjorie. What is it, Marjorie Taylor Greene on that one?
Yeah, I don't know. And the bad news is.
What do you think of Mark's analogy, Tony? It's not that bad. Thankfully, it doesn't come up that often.
No, I agree. Yeah, not in my experience, no. But you know, I mean, the nature of the work is, you know, on a pretty regular basis, someone's going to want to do something, and you're going to look into it and have to advise them that they shouldn't, they can't. And, you know, no one likes to be told they can't do something they want to do.
So is an accounting firm any different than a law firm in those regards, or are the ethical standards fairly much the same?
No, very much the same. In fact, maybe even more so. The accounting industry now is a regulated industry. What they do is overseen by a bunch of alphabet soup agencies. They're there to make sure that processes followed, procedures are followed, sign-off is there, substantiation for all decisions is noted and documented. And the work is reviewed by these agencies periodically.
No,
they don't review everything you do. Yeah, they review everything you do. But as if they came into the office and said, okay, we want to review the work for your 10 largest clients. Give us all these records. Yeah, I'll give us all these records and we're going to look at it. So, yeah, the standards are really high.
Wait a minute. So you're telling me the work of accounting agencies is reviewed by a federal agency?
Yeah, yeah. The PCAOB, yeah. Yeah.
Since when?
And other agencies too, depending on what nature of the work.
Like
Yeah.
Since when?
AICPA? No, they wouldn't do it.
No, that's a professional organization
Got it.
like the ABA and so on. But no, these and this is partly accountants by the nature are always detail oriented and not that there aren't rogues out there, but for the most part, it's not the kind of industry you go into if you're looking to like break rules. It's not
So wait a minute.
sympathetic to that.
Was this all a result of the Enron, or has this been going on for?
Well, Enron ended up being, if you will, the last straw in terms of when it came to more oversight, the decision to put out more oversight on the accounting industry. Because Enron brought about Sarbanes-Oxley, which brought about innumerable rules on what companies cannot do, the relationship with their accounting firm, with the accounting firm's responsibilities. It created this organization called the PCAOB, which is designed to review the rules and probably audit and review the work of the accounting firms to make sure they're complying with the rules.
So the auditors get audited.
Yes. And the other thing auditors have to comply with that's it's been around a long time and precedes Enron is independence. Independence is of paramount concern because if you lose your independence with the client, that means you are you have to disclose to the SEC if it's a public company that you have an independent problem with respect to the client and other professional agencies. And you have to fix it, and all likely you have to resign. You may have to resign from the client because of that.
So is independence just on that one? So if you're if you're the CPA firm for Ford and you own shares in Ford, is that considered independence?
That would be, if you work on the Ford account, that would be considered a significant breach of independence. Yes.
Okay,
Holy
so
shit.
you would have to disclose your own personal portfolio as a result.
Oh, you do. You have to disclose everything to the firm. The firm needs to see, for every single person, needs to see all their financial holdings, mortgages, where they have their insurance. Just to give you an example of how extreme the rules are. If the firm I'm with audits a bank, I can't get a mortgage from that bank.
Now, what if you're okay? So this is interesting. So banks resell people's mortgages to each other. So when you took out your mortgage, it was with bank of number one, and then bank of number one resold it to bank of number two, and you were auditing bank of number two, but unbeknownst to you, your mortgage was sold. What do you do? You still
actually that wouldn't be an independence problem because the loan was, as long as the loan was originated with the bank, it didn't require you to be independent from. What happens after the fact is not a problem.
The bank in the first instance.
Yeah. Think about it. The rule is designed to make sure that the fact that you work for the accounting firm that audits the bank isn't going to give you any preferential treatment. Now, you're getting the same loan that anyone walking up the street is going to get. But because you work for that accounting firm, you can't do it.
I'm still trying to get over this idea of a regulated industry. So I guess I shouldn't be because the Boeing is a regulated industry, I assume at some level, which is Boeing, at least in regard to their airplanes, they have to be ready to answer questions from the FAA about why these planes keep dropping out of the air. And they have to be ready to answer, I suppose, ready to answer questions about why they left a piece of software off or charged more for it. Is counting in the same boat, and when are lawyers going to get that way or never?
Aren't you already in that boat? Can't the BBO, if you did something unethical, can't I write the board of borrowers and have you thrown out?
That's a different question. If I'm understanding what Tony's saying, and you've fallen into a good question, but
it happens. Even a blind squirrel finds an acorn every now and then.
Exactly right.
The point is that for lawyers, there may be grounds to investigate if something comes up, for example, a complaint. But the flip side is we don't have anybody sort of walking in our offices every, month or year, and picking 5 files randomly to see whether we did a good job on those files. And yet that's exactly what it sounds like happens to accounting firms.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
That's insane. That must be awful.
Yeah.
They
It's making the work of the auditor. And was it, I was only peripherally involved, but the person who signs the financial statements, which would be the audit partner, their job is a nightmare because they're under scrutiny from these agencies. Their work is scrutinized by these agencies. And by the way, they can be extremely challenging to work with. Not wanting to listen why you did what you did was right, not wanting to even entertain the rationale is really an issue. But pressure from the agencies, pressure from the firms themselves, because the firms themselves want to make sure that under no circumstances does your actions, your behavior somehow adversely affect the brand and reputation of the firm, paramount above all else. So the firm is also reviewing your work constantly. So all your major accounts are going to be reviewed by the firm. Someone else in the firm is going to review your work at least once a year.
Is everything audited by this outside organization, or do they randomly audit the work of accounting firms just like they randomly audit Mark's tax returns?
It's
Allegedly.
random. It's random. Yeah. They can't review all. I mean, these firms are enormous. You can't review all their work, but they will pick. What they will do is if there's 10,000 audit partners, they'll pick 500, and they'll pick of those 500. They'll pick their handful of their largest clients, and they'll dive into the work they did at those clients.
How long does that take? How long does that review take?
Depends on how complicated it is. I mean, can take. Truthfully, I was not involved in that, so it's speculation on my part, but it's not a week. Put it this way.
Well, let me ask you this: do big accounting firms then have a whole department that's job is to work with the feds in connection with its audits, produce the papers, and then to argue why the feds are wrong or right on any given
I'll bet that department's called compliance, should it exist.
Exactly correct. Yeah. Though they do have very large departments. Look at him. My gosh. Right.
I ain't so dumb anyway.
Well, you lucked out again.
Yeah. So it's not as much fun as it used to be, to say the least, because of all the oversight and the tension involved. And
why was that viewed as better? Why was that viewed? Why was that put in place? Because the way law tends to work is if something goes wrong, that may give rise to a malpractice action or some sort of complaint. And that was, I think, has been considered to be enough. Why didn't that work in accounting?
I could hazard a guess because they gamed the system and innocent people lost money on things like MCI and Enron. And I think, doesn't it tie back to the Securities Act of 1933? Ha!
Another one.
Smoking.
He really is a smoke show today.
Some sort of.
You're right. It has to do with the financial markets, right? The integrity of the financial markets, right?
It's widows and orphans. That they screw everything up.
Those damn widows and orphans.
I think
know any widows and orphans, by the way?
The problem was that there are probably more lawyers in the Senate, whoever the Sarbanes-Oxley worded that, it probably originated in both House and Senate. So there's probably more lawyers than accountants who become senators and Congress people. Is that true? And that's why you guys your old business got the shaft, and lawyers are sailing smooth?
Probably. Well, who knows? But I will say that because the lawyers don't necessarily understand the industry, right? They didn't work in it. They don't understand it. You really have to be in it and see the pressure these people are under internally, and the issues they're dealing with to empathize with it and come up with a rule that may be a little more flexible, sensitive, rather than being a dogmatic rule saying,
Well, and aren't the, like in the cases we were just talking about, aren't the clients sort of pushing the accountants and lawyers to be sleazy? Come on, guys, you can. We'll form a shell company in Bermuda, and then Isle of Man, and my compensation will be through Malta, and all sorts of things.
So, well, the auditors basically are not going to compromise at the end of the day, but it makes for a very awkward relationship, right? The accountants the clients are arguing with you in terms of why don't you treat it differently than you're treating it. I think that's appropriate. I think it's right. I don't necessarily agree with your interpretation. And the auditors and the people in the firm are looking at the issue. They've got some extremely smart people working in these national offices who look at it and see things going on nationally and globally, and get back to the people in the field saying, no, that's the right answer. And you're at loggerheads with your client.
So and this would be maybe the final question given the time, isn't it just better to follow the rules?
Oh, yeah, exactly. Exactly. And that's all the auditors are trying to do.
Push over.
No, they want to.
Come on,
it's just being pushed to
spirit.
Can't we all just get along?
Yeah. Well, we'll just compromise until we're running the House and Senate, then we'll go from there.
They don't want me they don't want me there. I'd be as kooky as the kookiest lady there.
Hey, speaking of which, just shift gears here. I haven't looked at the details of the bill Biden's putting together, but someone mentioned that in there is rules that are going to change and allow folks to deduct their state and local taxes.
Oh, really?
Yeah, which would be a huge for folks who live in states that have income taxes.
Wait a minute, I thought didn't we used to be able to do that?
Used to, not anymore. Yeah, the Tax Act of 17 got did away with that. That's why people.
That's what Trump wanted to screw over the blue states.
Which should hurt blue states primarily.
Us, New York, New Jersey, California.
Yeah, exactly.
Interesting.
Exactly. Yeah, huge. So that would be an enormous boon to those states and the people living in those states, right?
Interesting.
Yeah. So hopefully that will
point here. The point being, for those of us who are slow, the point being that if you're in a state that has high taxes, way back in the old days, the dinosaur era, you got to deduct those from your federal returns anyway, so it bothered you a little less. But when the tax laws changed, you might find it beneficial to move to Mar-a-Lago or wherever they are, because I assume there's no taxes down there.
Right.
The change that Tony's referring to in whatever is 2017 seemed to favor Wyoming, or the kind of the middle of the country where state taxes were traditionally lower, and you didn't have these egregiously high income taxes, state income taxes. New Hampshire, but New Hampshire, they seem to do things like they put taxes on shoreline. If you have a lake house, on they just tax differently. I don't think they tax less. They seem to tax differently and I have a very small understanding of that. Literally,
probably true.
Anecdotally.
This Biden thing will have the effect of driving people back to civilization, which is the coasts, correct?
It would, I think, make it.
I don't get a laugh from that, Mark.
I'm not sure how civilized we are. We had 18 inches of snow yesterday.
True. Keep going, Tony.
Yeah. No, but you're right. So folks that are thinking about relocating because of that issue may now, if this becomes law, might reconsider. Right. Stay put. Right.
Okay. So what's this podcast been about, Mark?
Well, I will quote my friends at Car Talk and say we've now wasted a perfectly good hour.
Worse than usual.
But Tony's been an extremely tolerant and patient guest.
Yeah, surprisingly, given your
we still haven't figured out what this is about, but what I've learned is Tony is extremely patient, and that if I were to start a company, I would probably want to consult with him about getting proper tax compensation.
That is shameless pitching. Shameless.
Wow,
pitching.
thank you.
Yeah, that is
he never
shameless.
announced what firm he was with, but he seems like he'd be a decent dude, unlike the IP lawyers at the same firm.
Well, there we go.
There
we go.
Shameful.
Well, Tony, I don't know, you will probably lose even more business as a result of this podcast. But don't worry. You're
gonna have to like
probably
put
over
a
50. You look like you're over
like
50.
a black stripe over his eyes, so that no one will know who he is.
That's a good point.
We probably won't publish this for 20 years, so you're okay.
Yeah, actually, just use my publish my name backwards, and no one will figure it out.
Yes, right.
Exactly. Perfect.
Right. Yeah, for our one listener, our negative listeners will love it. Okay, well, thank you. We will.
Thanks, Tony. Nice meeting you.
Yeah, same here.
It's a pleasure.
Same here.
See you guys.
All right. Bye.